Candace Owens is an American media personality who has been extremely critical of Israel. She fell out with Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire. She was working for them. And she has also been a big supporter of Kanye West amidst all his controversy of articulating anti-Semitism. But I want to show you an interview clip of Candace with Piers Morgan because it needs unpacking. Okay, this was just yesterday that this clip was released where Piers was pressing her on her criticism of Israel, particularly in the way Israel's conducting her war against Hamas. And I really felt that her words needed unpacking. First of all, we're going to look at this question of the word genocide, because Piers presses her on whether she thinks Israel is committing a genocide. She had put out tweets which some thought was implicitly suggesting that Israel had done that. She denied that, but then she also won't say that Israel isn't doing a genocide. And I want to just show you the conversation, because what we'll do is hear her arguments and then see the moral and logical flaws in what she's saying, because these points really need unpacking. So have a watch of what she says when she's pressed on this genocide question, and then we'll unpack it.
Do you think, for the record, that what Israel's been doing constitutes genocide?
Well, what I've been having trouble is all of the people that are pro-Israel and say it's not a genocide won't tell me what is a genocide. What percentage of a population has to be killed before we can use the word genocide? It's a funny little thing. They won't tell you. They won't tell you what constitutes genocide. So I would like a clear understanding of how many Palestinians have to die before we are allowed to term it a genocide. All of the experts can't agree on what a genocide actually is, but they love to float around the word on virtually every other issue. You know, I had Rabbi Barclay on my show, on one of my last shows when I was on the Daily Wire, and I asked him that question pointedly: what is genocide? Let us know, experts, what percentage of the population of Palestinians has to be killed before we are allowed to say that it's genocide. What I can tell you is I am completely uncomfortable and utterly against the amount of Palestinian innocent lives that have been lost in this conflict, particularly children. And any person who is fearful of stating that the death of innocent children has been utterly unacceptable is a coward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I completely agree, but do you personally think it constitutes genocide, which is the deliberate...
What I'm saying to you is
I can tell you what
pursued on my show.
Yeah.
What is the number?
No, I understand.
What is the official number? That's it. I mean, somebody tell me and I'll give you an answer.
Well, I don't think there is a
Try
specific...
it. Try it when you have...
Well, it's not about a number.
Tons of people on both sides of the debate on.
Yeah, but it's not...
No. What do you mean it's not a number?
Here's my answer.
And do they give you an answer?
Well, no, because here's the point. It's not about specific numbers. It's about an intent.
But it has to be.
Well, no, it's not. It's about an intent to eradicate.
That's not true, Piers, because in America, they say that Native Americans, it was a genocide committed by white men. This is what they say, right?
No, but I'm talking about what the definition of a genocide is.
But what I'm telling you is that would be incorrect, because the majority of Native Americans died from smallpox. It was accidental. Some 90% of the Native Americans that lived here died from smallpox, and it's considered a genocide.
No, I understand. I'm telling you what the definition of genocide is, which is not about a specific number in any circumstance. It's about an intent to target and eradicate a whole people based on their ethnicity.
I'm disputing that by telling you that they legally say within America that Native Americans, a genocide was committed against Native Americans. Factually speaking, 90% of them, 90 to 93% of them died from smallpox. So it was actually an epidemic, right? So is the definition shifting? Because it is my understanding from Rabbi Barclay that the definition of anti-Semitism shifts. So maybe the definition of genocide has shifted, but genocide in school.
Let me read you the exact wording and see whether you think it applies to. Well, let me read you the exact definition of genocide from the Oxford English Dictionary: the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. So by that definition, do you believe that is what's happening to the Palestinian people and it's being perpetrated by Israel?
Well, I would say is that Israel has proven in the past that they can be very specific when they want to get somebody out, whether that's a hostage or any other certain military operation. And what I am seeing happening forgetting the specific language of a genocide is something that I'm using my platform to speak out against, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me what the media calls me. I've had every headline. I do not believe that they are being careful in what they are doing. I think it has been it seems to me that the destruction of the hospitals and the schools and of the UN buildings. Would you say, Piers, that you believe that's unintentional?
I do not believe Israel's waging genocide. I think that...
You believe, but I'm asking you, do you believe that the targeting going room to room in the hospitals is intentional?
Well, no, I'll be clear with you. I can answer the question. I have said repeatedly in the last few weeks and months that I think the proportionality of Israel's response is now unacceptable. And particularly since they decided to go into Rafah, a refugee camp that they set up, to then target Hamas in the middle of a refugee camp where you're bound to kill so many innocent civilians in the process, I think is unacceptable. But I'm just curious, given that you tweeted about genocide and no government ever has a right to do it, whether by your calculation from that definition, what Israel is doing is deliberately killing a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group.
Yeah, well, what I can say to you, again, because these definitions shift, I don't think we need to focus on the word, because I'm telling you what I believe. And my belief is that they are not being careful whatsoever. My belief is that there has been too much loss of Palestinian life.
But that's different to genocide, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but okay, that's fine. We don't need to. That's what I'm saying. I don't know why you're obsessing over this one word. It doesn't matter.
Well, because you tweeted about genocide.
You told me.
I'm only trying to clear up.
It's about Brian Mast. So you're harping on this issue. There's a lot more topics that we should talk about. I'm being very clear in how I feel about this issue.
Right. Let's pause there for a second. Okay. So this issue of genocide is, and we're going to go back to the video because there's a second point that I wanted to pick up on. This issue of genocide is really straightforward. Saying, when she says, well, what's the number? How many constitutes a genocide? Is such morally childish, logically childish and flawed language. This is what a genocide is. Very simple. If you are at peace with your neighbors, with another people, and that people wage war against their peaceful neighbors, another peaceful nation, with the intent to destroy them and eradicate them, that's genocide. But if you're reacting to another people that are trying to wage war on you and trying to destroy you, that's not genocide, that's war. Isn't that obvious? Isn't that the obvious definition? Isn't that the obvious moral position to have between the difference of genocide and war? It's whether, was there peace beforehand? Was it two peaceful sides? And one, so that's what happened in World War II. The Nazis waged war against the Jews who were living peacefully with them, peacefully alongside them. And they said, we're gonna seek to destroy you. That's genocide. When we fought against the Nazis, when the Allies fought against the Nazis, it's not genocide, that's war. And that's what Israel's doing. And then you talk about the numbers. This is also where it's so flawed. Well, let's just imagine that in World War II, after the bombing of Dresden and all those German cities, the Nazis still didn't surrender. And we had to keep fighting them, even as they were more and more depleted. And a very large percentage of them had to be killed because they kept fighting, they kept resisting. There were still pockets of Nazism and Nazi military fighting. And we went after them. Would that be considered genocide? Even if it was very high numbers, even if it was a significant percentage. No, it wouldn't be genocide. Because they started it. They started the war. They started the provocation. They threatened everyone else's security. They went after other groups of people. And so we're having to destroy them. So it's not about numbers. It's about intent. It's about who started it. And while we're on the subject of numbers as well, it is, frankly, unacceptable anymore for people to be lamenting the fact that schools and buildings and hospitals and UN buildings are damaged in this war. When we're not talking about people here, we're talking about buildings, when we know full well, through first-hand evidence, that Hamas hide among civilian buildings. The UNRWA, the UN organization, was complicit, helping to hide hostages, to fight, to help Hamas. I mean, this is so obvious, and to be ignoring that is to be willfully blind, and to say that that's not a legitimate target. Similarly with Piers Morgan saying that they can't go into Rafah. Israel's been doing all they can to protect non-Hamas fighters, but Rafah is a legitimate target for as long as Hamas are fighting there. When they started their genocidal campaign against Israel, they're the ones who are genocidal, not Israel. Israel's fighting the war to defend herself, to protect her people, to reclaim her hostages, and it's just and it's right. And this issue of numbers, let's just be clear. Israel has been more surgically precise than any other army has in the history of urban warfare. We're seeing from military experts such as Lord Andrew Roberts, one of the world's greatest military historians, and from the data that we're seeing about Hamas fighters killed, and from Israel's own projections of how much longer they think the military operation is going to need to take. I saw Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of the British Army in Afghanistan, reporting in Israel, saying that most of the IDF's military goals have been achieved now. Now the large-scale operation is going to start to wind down. And what have we seen in terms of those killed? What's the ratio been? Unheard of in urban warfare. In modern warfare, quite frankly. We're seeing a 1-to-1, roughly 1-to-1 ratio of civilian to combatant killed. By the way, let's also remember that the line between civilian and terrorist is very blurry. If you are a mother that mothers terrorists, if you are cooking for terrorists, if you are housing hostages, if you are teaching young kids to become terrorists, to become martyrs, are you a civilian? But anyway, let's even accept that definition to say civilian means not directly involved in the fighting in a direct way in terms of you're actually a fighter. Then according to that definition, Israel has been more precise. So what does Candace want? She says, of course Israel should go after Hamas. Of course. They should defend themselves. But if you're saying that their ratio of combatant to civilian has to be so low that it's never even been heard of before in urban warfare, where you know the average, according to the UN, of urban warfare, the average is 9 civilians to every 1 fighter killed, then what you're basically saying is that Israel has to act like a superhuman. So if Israel's having the best ratio ever and they still can't do it, well, then you're just saying that they can't. You're already saying they don't have the right to defend themselves. So there's your definition. And the issue of numbers is actually not relevant. The issue is, are you fighting a group who weren't at war with you? Or are you fighting a group who decided to wage war with you? And this numbers thing makes no sense. I mean, imagine saying, okay, 30,000 have been killed, but genocide, or when it gets too much, is 35,000. It's not about numbers. It's about the other side, the leadership of the other side, and whether they're threatening you. And for as long as they're threatening you, for as long as they're waging war against you, you have a right, a duty to fight them. And the suffering of the civilians on the other side is the responsibility of their leadership. And they should do all they can to try and resist, to try and change that. It's not Israel's responsibility. This is so obvious. It's such an obvious moral equation that I have to wonder whether in the case of Candace and even Piers, when he's saying, well, yeah, I don't like what they're doing, I have to wonder, are they actually being morally dishonest? Are they actually being duplicitous? Do they actually have some other kind of agenda? I fear in the case of Piers Morgan, there's a bit of a desire to be a populist, to speak common sense, but also at the same time to ride the populist hysterical waves, even if they don't make moral sense. And in the case of Candace, perhaps similar kind of thing. Not sure. But I wanted you to see one further clip, okay? Because this is where she's now asked by Piers, why does she have this seemingly double standard where she didn't tweet about what happened on October 7th, but then she talks about Israel's response the whole time and criticizes. I want you to watch what she says, because this is, I just think, incredibly revealing. Have a watch.
I also, from the start of this conflict, believe that Israel not only had a right to defend itself after the terror attack on October the 7th, but a fundamental duty to its people. And here's where I'm just curious about your tweeting through this procedure, this whole war, because on October the 7th, you didn't tweet anything. You didn't tweet anything on October the 8th. And October the 9th, you tweeted, so much world peace ever since we got the orange man out of office. So glad the adults are back in charge. A lot of people say, well, if you care this much about innocent people being killed, why didn't you say anything when 1,200 people were massacred to death in the most brutal, barbaric manner in this awful terror attack by Hamas, and nearly 7,000 more were wounded, some of them catastrophically and irreparably? Why did that not compel you to say anything?
Well, first and foremost, Israel's a foreign country, so typically I talk about topics that have to do with America. Secondly, you're only quoting my Twitter feed. I'm also on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. I also had a daily podcast in which I did respond directly about what happened and called the events horrific. Multiple times, said what Hamas did was absolutely horrific. So you're using a snapshot of my Twitter feed where you're acknowledging that I didn't tweet for days to suggest that I didn't have anything to say about what had happened. Now, to be clear, I am consistent on all matters. I do not want America involved whatsoever in anything that is happening in Israel. I don't want my dollars sent over to Israel. We should not be supporting Israel. Obviously, Thomas Massey has done a lot of work showing how it doesn't even make economic sense that we have so much debt and yet we're sending money over to support Israel. And the biggest issue, by the way, that I have with Israel in talking about them being above reproach is the fact that they are supplying the arms to murder.
Above reproach. Israel's above reproach? Wow.
They're Christians, okay? In Armenia, the oldest Christian country in the world, and yet nobody talks about that. For whatever reason, it seems to be the circumstance that when Jewish people die in Israel, it's wall-to-wall coverage. But when Christians die all over the world, nobody talks about it.
Oh, wow. Wow. One sec. Hold on. When Jewish people die in Israel, it's wall-to-wall coverage. But then no one talks about the other suffering. First of all, yes, what happens in Israel is absolutely, there's a disproportionate focus. No question, I'm glad she's raised that point. But it's not disproportionate focusing on all the Jews that get killed. The disproportionate focus in the world is on Israel's response, Israel's just response, Israel's duty to respond, and having a laser-eyed, narrow, magnified focus on every single thing they do. Often reporting on things in a hysterical manner without actually knowing the facts, and only later finding out the facts are very different to the Hamas narrative. So it's so ridiculous. It's the opposite of what she's saying. The disproportionate focus, yes, is on Israel, but not for the Jews killed. It's for the Arabs killed. And she's about to make the point about how there's so much other suffering going on in the world. Yeah, she's absolutely right. And it is absolutely shocking how little focus is given compared to what Israel's doing. But let's see a bit more of what she's saying, and I'll respond more.
Everyone wants to correlate everything to World War II. Everyone wants to talk about Adolf Hitler, and rightfully so, he was a horrific person. But nobody wants to talk about Henryk Yagoda, right? Nobody wants to talk about the Bolsheviks. Nobody wants to talk about the Christian Holocaust. I am tired of the media, exhausted of the media not speaking about what is happening to Christians all around the world. So you know what I'm asking for? Actual equality, okay? Because it seems like this is like a special category, the special relationship that we have. I'm a Christian first, okay? And so my concerns are going to be with what's happening to Christians all around the world, because it is us. We are the #1 most persecuted religion in the world. And all Christians watching this need to realize the time is now to start speaking up, because we have been silenced about the things that are happening to us for a very long time. And the media is very clearly not our friend. When there is wall-to-wall coverage of Christians being killed, in Armenia, Christians being killed in Nigeria, and the treatment of Christians in America and all across the globe today, then you ask me if I will use my platform and I will use my voice to speak about what's happening in Israel. How about that?
Okay. I think that's a perfectly reasonable point.
Okay, this is ridiculous. She is saying, let's just follow the argument. She says, Piers says, why didn't you say anything about what happened on October 7th? She said, well, I did on my podcast. So he says, okay, yeah, but you focus a lot more of it on X, on Twitter, and on social media. And then she says, I'm not going to talk about this the whole time when there's so many other conflicts. I'm a Christian. There's so much Christian suffering and persecution. She's right, by the way. Do you know how many tens of thousands of Christians have been killed and kidnapped in Africa? I think nearly like 70,000 over the last few years. And we don't know about it. And we don't talk about it. And good for her, by the way, for talking about it. But then the problem with that is that she does spend an enormous amount of time on her platform criticizing Israel and talking about and insinuating that they are doing the most horrific, genocidal, kind of outrageous, disproportionate action in Gaza. And so she's breaking her own rule. She's saying, we've got to talk about all these other problems affecting Christians. Why is everyone laser focused? She's laser focused. If she didn't talk about what was going on at all, fair enough, but she is. And this is where she's being completely unfair, completely illogical. And as for saying, well, you know, I spoke about it on my podcast and I said it was horrific, I think she knows very well that her Twitter is going to be drawing even more attention than her podcast, which you have to pay a premium for and all that. She knows that Twitter is perhaps the most laser-focused place in which her comments and her views will be seen. And she's entitled to talk about whatever she wants to on that platform. But to decide, I'm just going to draw attention to what is Israel's response over and over and over and over again on Twitter. But I'll pay lip service, you know, briefly to what happened on October 7th. I think is not really being honest, because she's choosing to keep talking about Israel's response on her social media platforms time and time and time again. She's asked, why are you talking all about Israel's response, but not about what happened on October 7th? She said, I'm tired of everyone focusing on Israel. What about all this? Well, because you're talking about it. You're talking about it time and time again, about what Israel's doing in response, but you never talk about what happened to Israel. You don't focus on that. So frankly, I'm sorry, but Candace, I think, has she's maybe quite clever at trying to divert and deceive people from the actual factual reality of the word she says. I don't know whether she's realizes that she's being morally and logically dishonest, but she is, and I felt the need to call it out because it doesn't seem like Piers fully appreciated the dishonesty in what she was saying. And so I think that we need to call it out, because otherwise these nonsense ideas spread. So if you like this video and you agree, please do share it with others, comment, like, do all those things to get it out into the algorithm, because it's really important that we spread the truth and spread morality. I'm Ollie Annisfeld and you're watching JTV. Thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.